Hello and welcome back to The Lord of Trolls Wills It. I'm J-M. Other way.
I'm Matthias.
And we're going to be talking about Castles and Crusades. And just to kind of give an overview of this first episode, we're talking about the Castles and Crusades reforged editions. And that's one of the things I love about Castles and Crusades. There are no new editions of Castles and Crusades. The one that was published 20 plus years ago, when they were one of, if not the first people to look at the OGL and go, but wait, we could do our own thing with this, is completely the same game that is today. The game's expanded. The game has had multiple rules and editorial passes, incorporating errata. But this book is it's a straight through line. It's not like throw out all of your old Castles and Crusades books and get the new ones. The only difference for Reforged, and we'll talk a little bit about this, is that some of the stuff in the OGL is not in here anymore. Wonder what could have happened. The other reason we love it is, like, check this out. Like, we talked in our episode 0 about how this is a through line from AD&D right down to the covers.
Yeah, the Monster and Treasure book's even more on the nose.
Yeah, I didn't grab that one. I could, but I'm not going to. We'll do that. Oh, do you have them? Do you have your AD&D one? I'll hold up the Monster and Treasure one.
Yeah. So because I have it right here.
Yeah. Like right on the nose. So, all right, Matthias, if you had to boil down a shelf's worth of Castles and Crusades books into somebody who's like, what is this game? How does the siege engine, because the siege engine is what they call it. How would you describe the siege engine to someone who is coming in from, let's say the world's most popular RPG at this point?
Yeah.
How would you sell them on here's what makes this game, here's what's familiar, and here's what makes this game unique?
Okay. So I mean, the first thing you need to break it down is for a simple breakdown is it scales with you in a logical, non-min-max optimizer character buildy way of running the game. So as you advance in levels, you become more competent naturally without needing to pick a new feat or buff your attributes or anything like that, because the level scales with you. And what I mean by that is, on average, you're rolling a d20, adding a level, an attribute modifier, possibly a modifier coming from your race or your class. Usually it's your race, not your class. And you're trying to meet and exceed a challenge class, so a target number. And that target number is determined by the attribute you're checking. You either are going after a primary or a secondary. Your primary, your target number is at least a 12.
Mm-hmm. And
your secondary is at least an 18. And then it scales up from there. It rarely scales down from there. It usually scales up. But you always get to add your level. And what I love about this, and it's not just attribute checks, saving throws are the same way. So I can say it concisely here, that Castles and Crusades. So people always talk about 5th edition D&D. Oh, we love the saving throws because it's tied to an attribute. You're doing a dex save, not a reflex save. Yeah, Castles and Crusades did that.
Yeah, they did it first.
And they would write in there, this is for breath weapons or poison, kind of that through line from AD&D and from 3rd edition, where they took the, let's call it hodgepodge of saving throws from AD&D and basic and stuff like that, and put it into 3. You had will, fortitude, and reflex. Yep. And then in 5th edition, it just tied it to the attribute directly, which I will say I believe is actually the better way to do it. Personally, if you're going to go unified D20 roll high, having it direct to the attribute, I think is better than those 3 saving throws. And so as things get harder, when you become more competent, you scale with it, because you're adding your level usually Not always. And that's the other thing I love about it. You don't have skills. There are no skills in the game. You can do secondary skills, which I do tend to do, but that's like one, like jeweler or herbalist. But there are abilities based on your class. And if it's a class ability or you're trying to do something that isn't an ability in that sense, it's just an attribute check, you get to add your level. However, if you're a fighter and you want to open a lock, well, that lock is a rogue class ability. The rogue gets to add their level to the roll. The fighter does not.
Right. But if you wanted to kick the door down, that's a very fightery thing.
Correct.
Sure, I'll let you add your level to that.
Yeah. And what I love about that, it makes classes matter way more than in the current edition of D&D, because technically anybody can pick a lock.
Right.
You know, now granted in CNC you can too, but it's harder if you're not the rogue.
Right.
And it makes it really simple and easy to use. Yeah, you know, your bonuses can stack up, but since third edition, who's not used to that? And honestly, if you've played Pathfinder in third edition, you know about high math additions. You know, I'm going to add plus 27 to my roll.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes things harder also, for instance, with magic. If you're trying to do a saving throw against a first level spell, your saving throw challenge level, so your target number, isn't adjusted by the level of the spell, but the level of the person who cast it. So if it's a 12th level wizard, that first level spell that you're trying to save against is going to be much harder than if it's a first level wizard.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's it. That's the core of the Siege engine. If you're coming from a D20 game, you know everything else about the game. Ascending armor class, you probably can guess the damage on most weapons, right? Your classes are the same. Adventurer's backpack, notwithstanding. Right. Castles and Crusades was designed to use the newer rules out of the OGL back in the third edition days to go back in time and recreate the sword and sorcery adventure gaming of our hobbies roots and the games that, you know, we kind of grew up with. In the last episode, Matthias and I both got in at second edition, which is a bit more like less sword and sorcery and more medieval fantasy, you know,
a little bit more epic,
but still Castles of Crusades can do that.
And if I remember correctly, in an interview with you, Steve said, and I recommend everyone go check out all the Castles and Crusades interviews and product highlights on Iconic.
Oh, thank you.
Steve said that when Davis and Matt Golden said, hey, we should basically create our own system, he didn't want it to be third edition because he genuinely didn't like it. Like, he's like, I don't like making adventures for this. I don't like running this. I run AD&D first edition. And so the goal was a modern game in the line of AD&D, and the Siege engine allows that because it's so simple. I'm not going to say CNC is a rules light game. It is not. But it's an easy game to run. It's like I always say, AD&D is an easy game to run, but it's not rules light.
Right. And here's the thing. 5th edition is not rules light. Right. I would say that the Siege engine, what you get in the core 3 books, but really this is what you need, the player's handbook, which you can get for free. I'll put a link in the show notes to where you can get the 7th printing of this book for free. And again, like we said, there's no different. The only differences between the reforged edition and the free 7th printing are some names of things we'll get into that in a second.
Yeah. And then art and layout, of course.
Yeah. The art and layout continually gets better. We now have full color art. We have, art continues to incrementally get better between each printing. The layout specifically in Monster and Treasure is light years ahead. of the previous printings in the reforged editions.
Yeah.
But it is not a complex, it is no more rules intensive or crunchy of a game than fifth edition. Now, much like fifth edition, if you want it to be crunchier, you can make it crunchier. Some of the rules in the Castle Keeper's Guide, some of the rules in that I just reviewed the Armory books, and the weapon and armor durability rules add a layer of verisimilitude that I do not need at my table. Because now I'm keeping track. I have to have all of the players keeping track of not just the damage they take, but half the damage. Like, it's a great system, and for a weapon durability system, it's pretty easy. I'm just not a weapon durability kind of guy unless it's saving throws in second edition, because I want to see if that fireball like burned up your spellbook.
Which, by the way, Castles and Crusades can do. It's in the CKG, and you can dial the crunch as low or as high, as ultra high as you want. And I kind of lean a little higher on the crunch, but I don't do the weapons durability, but I did add the breakage rules.
The breakage rules are great too, yeah.
And that only happens if you fumble or crit. You know, I mean, that's like the only time it ever happens.
Yeah, I like the breakage rules because, again, they're simple, and they add something that we already like intuitively, even if you're not using like critical hit decks or critical fumble decks, we all intuitively kind of get a 20 is really good and a 1 is really bad. And this adds a very simple overlay to how to use those rules. Yeah. So the latest version of the game is the Reforged edition. And in fact, there's just 3 books. Well, there are 4 books now, because they just reforged the Adventurer's Backpack, which I'm looking forward to. I know that the Adventurer's Backpack has some contentiousness to it with the classes that were available in there. And so they're the original one, that some of them were, weaker compared to the core classes. Some of them were better, which I don't care about. I'm the kind of guy who in second edition was like, play your Elven Spell Slinger. I will punish you for it. But they did the Reforged edition, and right now everything going forward is going to be Reforged. You're going to be looking for the little Trollord Games
2520 logo. Yeah.
And essentially what's going on is if you're here listening to us, then you probably have been in the space long enough to realize, oh no, there was as my friend John Doom calls it, the great unpleasantness, or the late unpleasantness, where basically someone at Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast went, all your games belong to us, and they tried to first revoke the Open Gaming License, which would have destroyed a lot of the hobby industry. And then they tried to enforce a new one that was like, well, if you do this, then it's ours, which also would have destroyed the hobby. And actually, there are some lingering effects of this that we won't get into. And a lot of publishers, including Trollord Games, went, I don't need the OGL. I think there was something great during this era of the OGL, where if you bought something that was OGL compatible, there was a kind of implied all of this flows to or from the same stream and is very compatible. And now we're seeing kind of in the aftermath, I think the example I used when I talked with Steven was kind of we're now back in the cable days, if you are old enough to remember cable TV, where once you got all of your cable bundled in, because there was just so few things, that you were like, well, if I get a cable package, I get all of this. Or if I get a streaming package, I get all of this. And now everyone wants to do their own thing. And so, okay, well, maybe the stuff I get from Kobold Press isn't going to be as usable with my Trollord game stuff. It isn't going to be usable as much with the stuff from Cubicle 7's producing in their own version of. We now have a dozen unique versions of 5th edition that are only going to continue to drift apart. Not the time to have this discussion, but like, I think there's something that we lost that I don't know that we're going to be aware of for several years. But that's why they reforged it. They basically were like, well, cool, we don't need the OGL. And so it's minor things though. It's like spell name changes. a couple of monster names, I think, got updated, but that's
some of the monster names, spell names, magic items.
yeah.
I mean, it's basically that, but it's still called armor class. Because
Six stats, they're still called the
yeah,
same thing.
because those are commonality terms
Mhm.
that aren't D&D isms in
Yeah.
that sense. Whereas, of course, Featherfall, Tiny Hut, Floating Disc, those things, you can quibble about words like sleep or bless, which some have kept in. I know some OGL scrubbers replaced those with basically the same word. It's the same thing, it just has a different word. So, yeah, I mean, you can take that 7th printing, or, I mean, I have also the 8th printing books. This is essentially the 9th printing of Castles and Crusades, and use the same thing, but the words have just changed.
Right. So instead of magic missile or mage armor, we have, magi missile and magi armor. And instead of polymorph, we have the polymorph things into other things or something like that.
Yeah.
Enough that there's no longer a legal precedent. But the other thing is now they're no longer beholden to the OGL and they can do whatever they want. But like Steve said in the interview, his goal, and he said, Davis and others have shown up with like, we fixed it. We fixed this problem that has existed only kind of internally since the first printing of Troll Lord games. And Steve's looked at it and is like, that's amazing. That's an optional rule. We're not implementing it. But why? Because that would invalidate all of the previous printings of Troll Lord games. And one of their goals for Castles and Crusades is if Matthias is still playing out of his little white box that he got from the original release of Castles and Crusades, and I show up and say, hey, we're playing Castles and Crusades, this is still compatible with that. And that is not a money grab mentality.
No.
That is a gamer first mentality. And that's why we're here, because it's clear to us that, listen, they used to say Castles and Crusades was the Rosetta Stone of gaming. And I think they should go back to saying that, because whether you're coming from AD&D or basic or 5th edition or 4th edition or Pathfinder 2nd edition, you understand intuitively how Castles and Crusades works.
Yes.
But also they care about the game as a community. They care about gamers as individuals. They care about the people in the industry. And I'm not saying that's a rarity, because when you talk to people like at Chaosium or you talk to, people at Pinnacle, they feel the same way. But Troll Lord games are taking steps outside of their own circles to make sure that gamers and game publishers are welcome in their space. And that's something that we believe should be, I don't want to say rewarded, but championed maybe is a good way to put it.
Yeah, and to their credit, then what they'll do with those optional rules, they will plop them into the Castle Keeper's Guide or the Adventurer's Backpack, or I saw a Discord rumor this morning that the spell book will get reforged possibly in the next year or two. Or in their new relaunch of the Crusader magazine, which issue 28 just came out, that they can put that stuff in there.
Should have put that on my order.
Or supplements like their herbalism supplement that also has monster harvesting rules in there. That's where that goes, not in the core book, because again, you're changing things. The only thing that they have added, now they've changed some things. Spell descriptions are totally different than they were. And there can be a debate about which version you like and which one you don't. The only thing going through it, now the page count is much higher in the reforged printing than in the 8th printing, and that's mainly due to layout. Spell descriptions are longer, and the way, the fonts are different, the layout of the races and the classes is a little bit different, so you're just adding pages there. The only substantive thing that they added that I harped on about, And I remember on Discord, Steve said, yes, 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 this is going to get added to the Reforged Player's Handbook. Are light burning times for torches, lanterns, and candles. For some reason, that was not in the previous printings. They added it, but it doesn't change anything. And it's literally the same burning times that you've had for 51 years.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you brought up a really good point, and I think this might be the last, like, kind of wrapping up this episode that we could talk about. We've explained how simple the siege engine is, but their goal is to support. I mean, this is the same way it's been. I would say it doesn't really matter whose guidance the D20 D&D hobby has been under. This has always been something that has been supported. The encouragement of homebrewing and house ruling. Mm-hmm. The Castle Keeper's Guide has so many options for you to say, hey, here's the base siege engine. But what if you don't like Vancian magic? What if you want spell points? What if you do want monster harvesting rules or granular weapon damage a la, I mean, let's be honest, like a la like RuneQuest or BRP? They're supporting a ton of different ways to play their game. The core siege engine is smooth and simple. It's the way a lot of people describe 5e to me. Well, it's a simple, at its core, the 5e system is roll d20, add your modifier, maybe add your proficiency, check for advantage, disadvantage. Higher you rolled, better. I just explained 5e in 15 seconds. That's like the siege engine. The core gameplay mechanical loop is very simple. And from there, you can bolt on as much complexity as your imagination enables you to.
Yeah. And I'm already excited for us doing a dedicated show just talking about the Castle Keeper's Guide, because it's so awesome. I use so much out of that. I have my own homebrew stuff because I've been running CNC for many years. I've got a whole folder of just added little bits and bobs that I throw in there. But the vast majority is from CNC itself. And I just put it in one doc for my players because they don't have the Castle Keeper's Guide. They don't have the Adventurer's Backpack. I don't make them buy that. I just put it in a document and said, these are the mechanics we use for basic mechanics for combat and for magic. Yep. And it's, I think 2-3 pages each at most. But there's so much cool stuff in there, from like equipment wastage to spell points. They have a system in there for feats, for meta currencies, there's so many options for critical hits. And I've tried them all. And some of them are insanely brutal, because I am the kind of person who, if you can do this to them, to the monsters,
they can do it to you.
Can do it to you.
100%.
And once a player has their chest caved in with a collapsing lung, a character, not the player, they start to go, oh, maybe this isn't as cool. when I'm down to my last breath, I'm like, well, you kind of liked it. You wanted it. So there, and the world building stuff in there is phenomenal.
So good.
They have domain rules in there. They have mass combat rules in there. I mean, it's really everything you could possibly hope for is in that book, and it's going to be awesome. And I know the new Reforged backpack is an expansion of the previous version with a lot more added rules in there. Yeah. And I backed that backer kit crowdfunding campaign at the highest tier before you go into some of the crazy stuff. So I'm getting the cards, I'm getting the rune spell stuff, the pets, the familiars book. Yeah. Like it's all gonna come here.
I think because the trolls want my money, they had that on the Castle Gygax or Castle Zagig level, where you could get like the regular books and like the leather bound books that had your names and scroll. And well, if I'm getting those, then when the Adventurer's Backpack came out, well, clearly I need that as well. So now my collector gene is now like, well, Castles and Crusades are just going to take all of your money. I'm like, yeah, no, it's. Well, any final thoughts on just kind of the overview of Reforged before we wrap this episode?
So I would say for those out there who haven't invested in Reforged, but have previous printings, my recommendation is I would recommend getting the player's handbook, just because of, torch burning times. No, and because of updating the language, and specifically when I say updating the language, I just mean changing it to non-OGL. Everything else is still the same. 100%. I recommend, if you're running the game and you don't have it, get the Reforged Monsters and Treasures book. It is leaps and bounds better than the previous one. When I heard that they're doing the Reforged one like they did Monsters and Treasures of Arid, I went, it's 100%, no questions asked. Buy. If you have the previous printing of the Castle Keeper's Guide, I'll leave that up to you. It's 99%. It's the same thing. I think page count, it's actually the same page count. It's just updating the words again for spell descriptions and some monsters. If you are new to Castles and Crusades, well, of course, you get the Reforged stuff. And again, if you're a player, get the player's handbook. If you are a Castle Keeper, get all 3 core books. If you're on a limited budget, get the player's handbook and the Monsters and Treasures book, and then you can add the Castle Keeper's Guide later, because that'll baby step you into running the game and then expanding it from there.
Awesome. Well, I think there's nothing else to say except Auftrag Delinda Est. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more of The Lord of Trolls Wills It.